I still remember the moment our scanners detected the signal buried beneath the asteroid's crust, a frequency older than our species, older than every star chart ever drawn. I should have turned back. I should have warned them. But instead, I touched it. The control room felt colder that day. My hands trembled as I hovered over the console, the sterile lights flickering in tandem with the pulse of the ancient signal. It felt as though the very air around me had thickened, pressing against my chest, squeezing out the breath I didn't know I was holding. I was surrounded by the hum of machinery, the distant clattering of boots on metal, and the quiet whispers of my colleagues, who were oblivious to the gravity of what we had just uncovered. Before I go on, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story travels across the stars. The signal, a series of rhythmic beeps and tones, resonated through the chamber. Each pulse seemed to echo with the weight of 1,000 untold stories, a cosmic heartbeat that drew me in. My heart raced. Was this a message of peace from a civilization long gone, or a warning from the depths of time? I felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my gut. The implications of our discovery were monumental, yet we were merely scratching the surface of something far more profound. As I leaned closer to the console, the holographic display illuminated my face, casting a ghostly glow over my features. The data streamed in, revealing the origin of the signal, a distant star system, light years away, where an ancient civilization once thrived. My mind raced with questions. What had happened to them? Why had they sent this message? My instincts screamed at me to tread carefully, to consider the consequences of our actions. Yet curiosity pulled me deeper into the mystery. The control room was a sterile environment, a cocoon of technology designed to protect us from the vastness of space. But in that moment, I felt more vulnerable than ever. The walls seemed to close in, and the hum of the machinery morphed into a low, ominous growl. I could almost sense the universe holding its breath, waiting for our next move. The weight of history pressed down on me, and I was acutely aware that we were standing on the precipice of something monumental. As the signal continued to pulse, I could feel the eyes of my colleagues on me, their expressions a mix of awe and apprehension. I was the lead analyst, the one who had always been eager to explore the unknown. But now, with this discovery, I felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. What if this message was a harbinger of doom? What if it contained knowledge we were not ready to handle? My thoughts drifted to the tales of ancient civilizations that had risen and fallen before us. I recalled the stories of those who had reached too far, only to be consumed by their ambitions. The echoes of their failures reverberated in my mind, a haunting reminder of the fragility of existence. I could almost hear the whispers of the cosmos, urging caution. The signal intensified, and the holographic display flickered, revealing a series of symbols that danced across the screen. They were unlike anything I had ever seen, intricate patterns that seemed to shift and morph, as if alive. My colleagues leaned in, their fascination palpable. But I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something unsettling about those symbols, a sense of foreboding that gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. "We need to decode this," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. "If this is a message, we must understand its intent." My colleagues nodded, their expressions shifting from wonder to determination. Together, we began the painstaking process of unraveling the enigma before us. Hours passed in a blur of data and analysis, the sterile room illuminated by the glow of our screens. As we worked, the atmosphere grew thick with tension. Each breakthrough brought us closer to understanding, yet the weight of uncertainty loomed larger. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were trespassing into forbidden territory, unearthing secrets that had been buried for eons. Finally, the moment arrived. The last symbol fell into place, and the message began to take form. My heart raced as I read the words displayed before me. It was a warning, a cryptic caution about the fate of Earth, a future shrouded in darkness, centuries in advance. The implications were staggering. The message spoke of destruction, of a time when our planet would stand on the brink of annihilation. I felt the ground shift beneath me, the gravity of the revelation pulling me into an abyss of despair. "What does it mean?" one of my colleagues whispered, their voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. I could see the fear etched on their faces, the dawning realization that we were not merely observers of the cosmos, we were players in a game far beyond their understanding. I I don't know, I admitted, my voice trembling. But we need to act. We need to warn them. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of our collective dread. But as I spoke, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was our chance to change the course of history, to avert the disaster that loomed on the horizon. Yet, deep down, I knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. The universe had a way of testing those who dared to challenge fate. As we prepared to relay the message to Earth, a deep sense of foreboding settled over me. The control room felt suffocating, the walls closing in as I contemplated the consequences of our discovery. I glanced at my colleagues, their faces a mix of determination and fear. We were on the brink of something monumental, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to unleash a storm we couldn't contain. The moment we sent the message, I felt a shift in the very fabric of reality. It was as if the universe had taken notice, a cosmic ripple spreading through the void. I could almost hear the distant echoes of 1,000 civilizations, their voices merging into a haunting symphony of warning and despair. And then, silence. The control room was engulfed in an unsettling stillness, the hum of machinery fading into the background. I felt a chill run down my spine, an instinctual warning that something was amiss. The calm before the storm, I thought, my heart pounding in my chest. But as I stood there, surrounded by the remnants of our discovery, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. The universe was watching, waiting for our next move, and in that moment, I knew that the fate of Earth hung in the balance. The moment we sent the message, a heavy silence enveloped the control room. I could feel the weight of the universe pressing down on us, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for the consequences of our actions to unfold. The screens flickered with data, but the numbers and graphs felt like they were mocking our urgency. We were standing on the precipice of a cosmic abyss, and I could sense the unease radiating from my colleagues. "What now?" someone finally asked, breaking the silence. But I had no answer. I felt like a marionette with severed strings, adrift in an ocean of uncertainty. The implications of the message we had sent to Earth were staggering, and I could only imagine how the world would react to the warning we had just delivered. As the minutes turned into hours, the tension in the control room thickened. We were all acutely aware of the stakes, yet there was an unspoken bond forming between us, a shared understanding that we were part of something monumental. I glanced at the faces of my team, each one reflecting a mixture of hope and dread. We were explorers, charting a course through uncharted waters, but the horizon was dark and foreboding. Then the alarms began to blare, piercing through the uneasy quiet. Panic surged through the room as we turned our attention to the main screen, which now displayed a series of rapidly approaching vessels on an intercept course. My heart raced. The fleet was unlike anything I had ever seen. Sleek and ominous, they glided through the void with a grace that belied their destructive potential. "Identify them!" I shouted, my voice rising above the chaos. The technicians scrambled to analyze the incoming data, their fingers dancing over screens as they worked to decipher the threat. "Unknown origin," one of them replied, their voice strained. "But they're armed and moving fast. They're not responding to hails." I felt a chill creep down my spine. The universe had taken notice of our message, and it was responding in a way we could never have anticipated. The realization that we were now in the crosshairs of an unknown force sent waves of fear rippling through me. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," I ordered, though I knew deep down that our options were limited. The control room transformed into a flurry of activity as my team rallied to execute my command. I could see the fear etched on their faces, but there was also a glimmer of determination. We were not going to go down without a fight. As we shifted our ship's trajectory, I couldn't help but reflect on the gravity of our situation. We had reached out across the cosmos, seeking to communicate with a distant civilization, And instead, we had awakened something ancient and hostile. The very act of sending that message had set off a chain reaction, and now we were facing the consequences. The enemy fleet drew closer, and I could see their weapon systems powering up. My mind raced with questions. Who were they? What did they want? And most importantly, had our message triggered this response? The answers eluded me, but one thing was clear. We were no longer just messengers. We were now participants in a cosmic game of survival. "Brace for impact!" I shouted as the first volley of energy blasts erupted from the enemy ships. The control room shook violently, and alarms blared in a cacophony of sound. I felt the cold grip of fear tighten around my heart as I braced myself against the console. The ship rocked, and I could see the lights flickering overhead. My team scrambled to maintain control, but the reality of our situation was sinking in. We were outmatched, outgunned, and utterly unprepared for this confrontation. "Return fire!" I commanded, even as doubt gnawed at the edges of my mind. We had no choice but to fight back, even against a foe we didn't understand. The screens lit up with the chaotic dance of energy blasts and explosions, a violent ballet of destruction playing out before us. As our weapons fired, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. Each shot was a desperate plea for survival, a testament to our unwillingness to surrender. But as the battle raged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were merely delaying the inevitable. The enemy fleet moved with precision, their formations tight and coordinated. They were a well-oiled machine, and we were flailing in the dark, trying to find our footing. I watched in horror as one of our ships took a direct hit, the explosion lighting up the void like a supernova. "Mayday! Mayday!" The voice crackled through the comms, a frantic cry that sent shivers down my spine. "We're going down! We're—" The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving a haunting silence in its wake. I felt a pang of grief for the crew I had never met, for the lives snuffed out in an instant. We were losing people, and the weight of that loss pressed heavily on my heart. "Redirect power to shields!" I shouted, my voice hoarse with urgency. We had to hold on, to fight for every second we could. The universe was vast, and I refused to believe that this was how our story would end. As the battle wore on, I found myself grappling with the enormity of our predicament. We had sent a message of peace, yet it had drawn the ire of an unknown enemy. I couldn't help but wonder if our attempt to communicate had been misguided. Had we miscalculated the risks? Had our desire for connection blinded us to the dangers lurking in the void? "Commander!" A voice broke through my thoughts, pulling me back to the present. A technician was frantically gesturing towards the main screen. "We're detecting a massive energy surge from the enemy fleet." I turned my gaze to the screen, my heart sinking as I watched the enemy ships align in formation, their weapons charging for a final assault. I knew in that moment that we were facing a devastating blow, one that would likely seal our fate. "Prepare for impact!" I yelled, bracing myself for the worst. I could feel the tension crackling in the air, a palpable sense of dread that filled the control room. And then it came, a blinding flash of light, followed by an earth-shattering explosion that rocked our ship to its core. I was thrown against the console, pain radiating through my body as I struggled to regain my footing. The control room was chaos, alarms blaring, and smoke filling the air. "Status report!" I managed to shout, my voice barely audible over the din. "Shields are down! We've lost main power!" someone cried out, panic creeping into their voice. "We're adrift!" In that moment, I felt a surge of despair wash over me. We were vulnerable, exposed in the vast emptiness of space. The reality of our situation settled in like a heavy fog, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the brink of annihilation. "Activate emergency protocols," I ordered, my voice steady despite the turmoil within me. "We need to find a way to survive." As my team scrambled to execute my command, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. We had to remain focused to find a way to navigate this crisis. The universe had thrown us into the depths of chaos, but I refused to let fear dictate our fate. And then, amid the chaos, a flicker of hope emerged. A technician shouted from their station, "Commander, we've managed to restore auxiliary power to the communication systems." "Get me a line to Earth," I commanded, my heart racing at the thought of reaching out once more. We had to warn them, to share the truth of what was happening. The technician worked quickly, fingers flying over the controls. "Channel open," they announced, and I felt a surge of determination. "Earth, this is Commander Voss of the Starship Endeavour." I spoke into the comms, my voice steady despite the chaos around me. "We have encountered an unknown fleet in response to our message. We are under attack and need immediate assistance." As I spoke, I could feel the weight of the universe pressing down on me once more. The silence of space was deafening, and I knew that the fate of Earth hung in the balance. But as I awaited a response, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were racing against time. The enemy fleet was regrouping, preparing for another assault, and we were running out of options. "Commander," a voice shouted, pulling me from my thoughts, "the enemy fleet is preparing to engage again." I turned to see the ominous silhouettes of the enemy ships closing in, their weapons primed for destruction. My heart raced as I realized that we were facing our final moments. "Prepare for impact," I shouted, bracing myself for the inevitable. And then, in that moment of impending doom, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. We had reached out across the stars, and though the universe had responded with violence, I knew that our message had been heard. The cosmos was vast and unpredictable, but we had dared to connect, to seek understanding amidst the chaos. As the enemy ships unleashed their fury, I closed my eyes, ready to face whatever came next. I had fought for every second, and in that moment, I found a sense of peace amid the chaos. The universe was a tapestry of light and darkness, and though we were caught in the throes of despair, I believed that hope still flickered somewhere among the stars. The impact was catastrophic, and the control room erupted into chaos once more. But even as the darkness closed in, I held on to the belief that our story was far from over. The universe had a way of revealing truths, and I was determined to uncover the mysteries that lay ahead, even if it meant facing the abyss. In that moment, I knew that our journey was just beginning, and the echoes of our struggle would resonate across the cosmos long after we were gone. The universe was watching, waiting for our next move, and I would not let it down. I floated in the silence of my cabin, the stars outside my viewport twinkling like distant memories. Each flicker reminded me of the choices that had led us to this moment, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of the universe pressing against my chest. The aftermath of the attack still echoed in my mind, a cacophony of chaos and despair that I couldn't shake. I had witnessed the destruction of our ship, the loss of my crew, and the relentless advance of a fleet that seemed to have no end. In the void of space, isolation became my only companion. I felt like a ghost drifting through the remnants of what had once been my life, a life filled with purpose, ambition, and dreams of peace among the stars. Now, all those dreams lay shattered, scattered like the debris of the Endeavour. I had reached out across the cosmos, seeking connection, and in return, I had found only hostility and violence. As I stared into the depths of space, I couldn't help but reflect on the signal that had set everything in motion. The message of peace had been a beacon of hope, a chance to bridge the chasm between civilizations. But what had we done with that hope? We had turned it into a weapon, a rallying cry for war rather than a call for unity. I felt an ache deep within me, a longing for the days when we believed we could change the course of our destiny. If only I had acted sooner, if only I had recognized the danger lurking within the message. The realization hit me like a cold wave. The signal had been a warning, yes, but it had also been an invitation to learn from the past, to understand the mistakes of the civilization that had sent it. I had been so focused on the present that I had ignored the lessons of history. I closed my eyes, trying to clear my mind, but the silence was deafening. It was a silence that echoed the emptiness I felt inside. I thought of my crew, of their laughter and camaraderie, now reduced to memories. I thought of Earth, the planet I had vowed to protect, now facing an uncertain future. The weight of my failure bore down on me, and I felt a sense of hopelessness creeping in. But then, in the depths of that silence, a spark ignited within me. I realized that I couldn't allow myself to succumb to despair. The universe had sent a message, and it was my duty to decipher it, not just for myself, but for all those who had fought and fallen in this struggle. I had to understand the relic, to uncover its secrets, and to find a way to turn the tide. With newfound determination, I pushed myself off the wall and floated toward the console. I activated the ship's systems, the familiar hum of machinery grounding me in reality. I needed to find a way to communicate, to reach out to anyone who might still be out there. I had to seek allies, to forge connections that could help us combat the encroaching darkness. As the screens flickered to life, I began to sift through the data we had collected about the ancient civilization that had sent the message. I searched for clues, for any indication of what had happened to them and why they had chosen to warn us. The more I delved into the records, the more I felt a sense of kinship with them. They had faced their own struggles, their own existential threats, and had ultimately fallen silent. I felt a pang of sadness as I read about their achievements and failures. They had been a proud people, advanced in technology and philosophy, yet they had succumbed to the very forces they sought to control. Their story mirrored our own, and I couldn't help but wonder if we were destined to repeat their mistakes. Hours turned into days as I immersed myself in the data, piecing together fragments of their history. I found references to a council that had governed their civilization, a group of leaders who had once sought peace but had been torn apart by fear and mistrust. They had received warnings too, just as we had, but had chosen to ignore them, believing they could overcome any threat through strength alone. The more I learned, the more I felt the weight of their legacy pressing upon me. I had to find a way to break the cycle, to ensure that we did not follow the same path. I needed to reach out to the remnants of our own civilization and remind them of the importance of unity. I initiated a communication beacon, sending out a message into the void, hoping against hope that someone would hear me. "This is Commander Voss of the Starship Endeavour," I transmitted, my voice steady despite the uncertainty. "We are facing an existential threat, but we are not alone. We have received a warning from an ancient civilization, and it is our responsibility to learn from their mistakes. We must unite, or we will face the same fate." As I sent the message, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps there were others out there who shared my vision, who understood the importance of collaboration in the face of adversity. Perhaps they would respond, and together we could form a coalition strong enough to stand against the encroaching darkness. Days passed, and each moment felt like an eternity. I remained vigilant, monitoring the communication channels for any sign of a response. The silence was oppressive, but I refused to let it consume me. I spent my time analyzing the relic, trying to decipher its true purpose. It was a complex artifact, imbued with energy that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the heartbeat of the universe. I began to understand that it was not just a warning, it was a conduit, a bridge between civilizations, a means of communication that transcended time and space. As I delved deeper, I felt a connection to the relic, as if it were awakening something within me. I could sense its power, a force that could alter the fabric of reality itself. I realized that it held the key to our survival, a way to harness the energy of the cosmos and turn it into a weapon of peace rather than destruction. But I also understood the danger it posed. The very forces that had led to the downfall of the ancient civilization could easily be unleashed again. I needed to tread carefully, to find a balance between harnessing its power and respecting the lessons of the past. Just as I was beginning to find clarity, a signal broke through the static of my communications. My heart raced as I recognized the familiar frequency. It was a response. I quickly adjusted the receiver, eager to hear the voice on the other end. "Commander Voss," the voice crackled, filled with urgency. "This is Admiral Rhea from the United Galactic Coalition. We received your message and are mobilizing our forces. We understand the threat you face, and we are prepared to assist." Relief washed over me, and I felt a surge of hope. Admiral Rhea, thank you. We need every ally we can find. The enemy fleet is regrouping, and we must act quickly. Understood. We are sending a fleet to your coordinates. We will coordinate our efforts and devise a strategy to confront the enemy together. I felt a sense of purpose return to me. We were not alone. We had allies who believed in our cause. I quickly shared the intelligence I had gathered about the enemy fleet, detailing their movements and capabilities. As we strategized, I felt a renewed sense of determination. Together, we could turn the tide. We could forge a new path, one that honored the legacy of the ancient civilization while ensuring that we did not repeat their mistakes. With the coalition forming, I began to prepare for the impending confrontation. I activated the relic, feeling its energy surge through me. It was time to harness its power, to use it as a beacon of hope rather than a weapon of destruction. As the coalition fleet approached, I felt a sense of unity among us. We were no longer isolated. We were a collective force, ready to face the darkness together. The stars outside my viewport seemed to shine brighter, as if reflecting the hope that had been reignited within me. But as we prepared for battle, I knew that the true test lay ahead. The relic was a double-edged sword, and I had to wield it wisely. I would not allow fear to dictate our actions. We would stand firm in our resolve to seek peace, even in the face of overwhelming odds. As the enemy fleet loomed on the horizon, I took a deep breath, ready to embrace the challenge ahead. We were on the brink of a new beginning, and I would not let our story end in despair. The universe had sent us a message, and it was time to respond with courage and conviction. The battle was upon us, and as the first shots rang out, I felt the energy of the relic coursing through me. I was no longer just a commander. I was a conduit for the hopes and dreams of all those who had come before me. Together, we would forge a new destiny among the stars.